Excuse me, Sam. We're going to start now. Okay. So raise your hand if you went to my student data enrichment update last year. And you came back. Okay. And the year before that? Not advised. Okay. The rest of you made the right choice. You're going to experience this once and you're going to determine. So I'm going to get into a little bit of the history since most people haven't seen it yet. We're going to talk about our team and the process, how we do our thing, that are available to you, and what the future looks like for our enrichment. So, first, history. Oh, I forgot I animated all these. It's a lot of clicking. So we're going to talk about the source systems. So we've got PeopleSoft. You get enriched tables in PeopleSoft, like the student profile, A-class, the financial aid views. That's all done within the source system itself. And there are some pros and cons to that. And I learned actually just late last week that those were built there for convenience because those were the developers who were available at the time, not because they needed to be there. And that's introduced some complexities downstream for the rest of us. We've got Workday now. Yay, Workday. So Workday Finance, that implementation was a couple years ago. I'm not going to say much about that because Ezzy's here and I don't want her to get some PTSD. But we've got a bunch of tables in the warehouse built on RAS report extracts that we turned into a somewhat Kimball-style dimensional modeling environment. And now we have HR, which of course we did differently again. So HR Workday data is, again, coming out of RAS reports. So in neither case are we actually ingesting raw data like we do with PeopleSoft. This is all somewhat curated by the work developer. And the HR data is just a couple specific denormalized, flattened, aggregated, already enriched-ish reports that get loaded into the warehouse and ODS. So beyond the source systems, most of our enrichment is going to happen in the warehouse, because the ODS has a no enrichment rule. So we have our warehouse history. As far as I know, Sybase was the first iteration of the warehouse. I don't think there was a lot of enrichment done at that time. And then we went into Oracle, and Oracle had some enrichment. Now we're in Redshift, and we have a lot of enrichment. So enrichment that happens within the warehouse. So some of the older items, deep person view, our most popular table in the warehouse. I'm sure everyone's used it by now, if you've ever used the warehouse data. We have the ASU Atom application, applicant, international student, the admissions fact tables. We have directory services, with the ResLife views, this old student retention table that was built just to drive the Corda dashboard and is still the only place to find some things. Then we started creating snapshots on things. Hey, we might want to capture history and be able to track how these things are changing over time. So we have history for things like person level data, kind of like deep person view, but not most of the columns, just a few. The application tables pretty much all have snapshots. So there's some of that out there. ResLife has some snapshots. Now we're getting into somewhat modern age. I can remember when these were created. So we're looking at the student profile views that were built on top of the PeopleSoft tables, just to give them a more friendly name. We have the student groups, student group history, student group by term. There's a few of these different tables that were built a few years ago, several years ago, for various purposes. We have lots of PeopleSoft tables. If you see something, something, PS something, something underscore TBL, there's a good chance that's effective dated. And most of the time, you just want the most recent records. We built all these current views. Some are cur VW, some are just cur, but there's a bunch of them out there that most people aren't familiar with and can save you a lot of work. And then we built some EP tables that got used outside of Ed Plus in the warehouse. And that was fun. And some of them are still out there. Now we're building all of these dedicated tables for student analytic purposes. So you're going to find a bunch of tables starting with SA popping up in the warehouse in different places. Also some that start with ASU if they're not specific to students. And we've got teams working on it. So back in the day, the warehouse team was all the, on top of loading all the data into the warehouse, fixing all the jobs that break because the source system's changed, all that. So a lot of work, very little time to actually do enrichment. So we started in the provost office with the actionable analytics data marts. Never figure out if I want DM or Mart, which is the Jira project name. But we're building dedicated tables to support the student analytics projects coming out of the provost office. And that was kind of POC on this shared development model within the warehouse. And then ET kind of jumped on board and said, we want to do more enrichment across the university as well. So we built the EADS team. And now they're basically one and the same. And I'm going to refer to it as the Enterprise Data Warehouse Enrichment, or you might see Enterprise Student Data Warehouse Enrichment in places. So how do we do? Well, we've got stakeholders, we've got users, and they can make requests. If you're a user or a stakeholder, you can make requests. I'm going to tell you how to do that in a little bit. Then we have an advisory group, and that advisory group will review these different requests, use them for development efforts. And if they make it to the top of the priority list, we're going to turn them into requirements, and we're going to have analysts defining those requirements. And because not everyone knows all the data, we're going to leverage this. So our subject matter experts are going to inform the analysts who are building the requirements. Those requirements will get turned into a script that can actually be run in the warehouse, and that's done by developers. And then we have the TOPS team, which is going to schedule those scripts to run every single day. And you'll notice I didn't say without fail, and that's why we have these objects being supported by the warehouse team, who's going to monitor the daily jobs, and if there's a problem, and they're going to try to fix it, and if they can't fix it, we'll go back to the developers. Okay, so why do we do all this? We want to improve the usability of the university's data, especially the university student data. We're going to do that with a logical data organization. We're going to try to make it easier to find things. We're going to try to make it structure the data in ways that's easier to use together or by itself. So you'll notice our objects in the documentation, sometimes we'll have like the word dimension, but it's in quotes. And that's because we're not building true dimensional models. We're taking aspects of dimensional modeling that we like and implementing those, and then other data structures that we like and implementing those as well. So it's dimensional-ish. We are doing a lot of denormalization. So within a source system, you're going to have a lot of different tables, and each of those tables is kind of intended to serve one specific purpose. If you're going to like full, third, or normal, whatever. We're saying we want the data in a structure that maximizes its usability in the analytics space. So we're going to bring it together in different ways in order to support that. Sometimes that looks like aggregations, some very detailed data, and users might not need detail. Have a guy will create that. Okay. So beyond aggregations and all that organizational stuff, we're going to use consistent nomenclature. So how we name things, we're going to do it consistently. We're going to try to make it easy to understand what something is without having to go to the documentation. We're going to implement business interpretations of the data. So the data itself might make sense to the source system. That doesn't mean it's going to make sense to anyone else. So we can add business logic to the data to provide it in a form that is more easy to understand for users. And we're going to do some cleaning because, well, if you've seen our data, you know why. And we have lots of documentation, presentations like this, trying to create transparency around how all this works, what's being created. You saw the metadata presentation for all those reasons. And yeah, support on top of documentation. So we've got a team, we've got a Slack channel. Like I said, we've got request form, we've got feedback forms. We're out here doing this. Anything you need, we want you to use these objects. So I mentioned the snapshots on a few of the tables in the warehouse. We're basically creating something equivalent for anything we create that makes sense to have history. So there's a lot of change capture within these objects as well. Okay, so you know what we do, you know how we do it, you know why we do it. So here's what you've got out there to play with. So if you're new to this space, you might also be new to the concept of the Data Academy. The Data Academy is kind of on a hiatus at this point for development. We're slowly progressing on a couple items, but there's a website out there. Oh, I should have logged into this earlier. You're going to see why. Start your stopwatch. Go. Not prepared. And I'm the one person who has this ridiculous delay getting into this site. Oh, you do? So it's not just me. Have you complained? Complained? Okay. Monitor the logs at one point. Apparently this is all to run like Google Analytics scripts. So that's fun. Considering we don't actually use that data for the most part. All right, so in the Data Academy, I'm going to introduce you to this a little bit as well. So we've got two different angles here. We've got the courses and the education data talks. So obviously TED Talks is copyrighted and stuff. So that's our version of it. And there's one of those, and that is our enriched data warehouse objects. So this is just an introduction video getting you acclimated with the project and what's out there and kind of how to use it and how it might be related to some of the stuff you're familiar with using from PeopleSoft directly. And then if you go on, we've got all these courses. So if you're new to the university or you have someone on your team who is new to the university, you can point them at the new data professional onboarding course. It'll go through all the different tools, systems, getting access to things, and all that fun stuff that's really frustrating when you start. If you're creating stuff in the portal, so there's a course on publishing dashboards and reports. If you're using Tableau, Sam created this one to kind of get you introduced to Tableau at ASU. And if you may or may not know what SQL is and what you should be learning it, this one's the course for you. If you know you want to learn SQL, you're not going to learn anything from this, and you'll have to wait till the next one comes out. And I'm just going to put it out there, if anyone wants to help us create any content for this, volunteers. So there's that video out there where you can kind of get some intro material. We have our student data enrichment site. So here, I swear I reformatted this last week and it's not showing up. But it looks a little funky with the 3 buttons, some kind of jumbled together. But if you want a list of all the objects that we kind of have out there, you can click on that, get the list. If you want to put in a request for something new or changed, you can put in that one. And if you just have general feedback on something, you can submit that also. And hopefully I will start checking it more than once a year. It's a different page. And we're trying to work on getting all the content onto this one, since we're not doing anything non-student at the moment. So there's some descriptive info on here, links to other documentation. If you want to kind of learn more about the change capture objects and how to use those, you can always click on that link. If you want a list of again, this is what we've done. This is what we're working on currently. Once you get into these objects, you'll be like, what? Trying to find the right word here that's appropriate. Who on earth would have possibly named these in this way? Guilty. This doc explains why I did it. And if you want to name something in a similar manner, it'll give you instructions on how to do that. A Confluence page, I wouldn't worry too much about that one at this point. It's probably very out of date. Prior presentations. So every year, I skipped last year. I don't remember why. And new this week, month, I can't remember which site I put on first, but I'm also working on some large language models, so you can use these for different purposes. I think I'll talk more about those later. All right, so on that site, you have the feedback form, you have the request form. All right, so I mentioned we do the change capture. So we have 3 primary types of objects. We have normal tables, base tables, the dimensions. You'll see log at the end of some of them, slightly different structures, purposes. We're gonna have change logs coming in pretty soon, I think. But then we have our SCTs, which are slowly changing things. Basically, if anything in that row changes, we get a new record. And then we have simulated snapshots. So we do these in this way because it's more efficient than doing traditional snapshots. It requires less data storage for anything that's not changing frequently. But we have that document on how to use those. All the summary sheets also have samples for each of those objects. List of all the objects, mentioned that. So let's pop in there. So here we've got, let's count, 36 objects. There are more in the warehouse, and I'll actually talk about some of them that aren't. But these are the ones that we think most people probably need to know about. So you've got things like the prog plan stack. Who has used one of these tables directly in the past? Okay. Who found it a little bit frustrating trying to use one of those in the past? Okay. So if you found it frustrating, you might want to take a look at our equivalent, which is SA ACAD prog plan sub. So it takes the prog table, the plan table, the subplan table, joins them all together. There's going to be a lot of codes in there, and you're probably tired of going and looking up code someplace else. It's just going to give you a description right next to the code. A lot of the times with those tables, you're going to be doing max effective dating because you just want the most recent record. There's a flag in there. You can just select flag equals Y, boom, max effective dated for you. Hit me. Yeah, this is definitely an example of denormalization where the prog data, the plan data, the subplan data, it's not all changing at the same time. And because these are all effective dated tables, PeopleSoft stores them all separately for efficiencies purposes. They also tend to store things and it kind of aligns with a page a lot of times, like a page in PeopleSoft is this table in PeopleSoft. One of the things I learned years ago was there are some records that are in prog and there's no matching record in plan or vice versa. And it turns out those are just orphan records. Someone went and cleaned up part of it, but not the other part. So one of the values that this table brings is it automatically joins those together, and it's going to remove any of those orphan records so they're not causing clutter. In addition to all the other benefits. I mentioned the effective dating. There's actually 2 different ways to effective date if you want to. So do you want to include future records or not? And there's different flags for that. I will say one of the downsides to going straight to this table is it has joined all the tables together. So it's creating a granularity that might be more detailed than what you actually need for your use case. So you might have to throw a distinct at the top of your query or something. But usually not a huge deal. ASRs. So ASRs kind of emphasized by the Provost Office a few years back. Starting to see a lot more uptake from faculty utilizing these. This is the kind of weekly grade report for students. It shows up in my ASU, tells them if they're, I don't want to use the word on track, that's a different system. Tells them if they're getting an A, a B, a C, or it might just be satisfactory, unsatisfactory. Usually if it's negative, there will be a reason why it was negative. So it might be lack of attendance, not doing assignments, and then there'll be an action that's suggested by the instructor to remedy the situation. So all that's stored in PeopleSoft in those 4 tables. And we have SA, ASR. Easy to remember. Puts it all together. So what you get is the grade. We actually bring in also some additional information from our grade dimension. So we have, what's that column called? Basically, the column that tells you, is this grade good or bad? And it's kind of some logic that's been standardized for the most part across the institution. So there's things like that out of the raw data at all. But then from the raw data, we're going to take all, because you can have more than one reason, more than one action for a single ASR. We're just going to bring those together and put a list of them on the ASR record next to the grades. And then there's flags for each of the actions and reasons as well. So you don't necessarily have to remember the code for the action or the reason. There's a flag, and the flag has a name that you might be able to understand, because I wasn't super involved in naming those. There was something else with this, but if you're all interested in ASRs, go here. Also, I'm probably going to talk about ASRs being part of our student class table. We've done some ASR aggregations as well. So we talked about the prog plan, subplan stack. The admission side has an equivalent. So before a student matriculates in PeopleSoft, they get admitted, they get matriculated, they're now an active student. They're in the Apple stack. And so we have another table for the Apple stack. Again, it's joining them together. It's bringing in descriptions for the code. Ooh, that was the other ASR thing. Those codes have descriptions, and the descriptions are also listed on the ASR record. But with the Apple stuff, all the same benefits, effective dating, all that good stuff. I don't think as many people probably use the Apple stack because the admissions fact tables kind of do some aggregation of the data for you to make it more usable. Canvas assignment submissions. This was a fun one. There's a lot of nuance inside Canvas, and there are still some things that you will not find in here that you might expect to, like a due date. Do you know there's no due date for an assignment in Canvas? Not reliably, at least, so we just didn't put it in there. But you'll see assignments that have been submitted, and Canvas calls it a submission, even if it hasn't been submitted yet, as long as it's expected to be. So this will also tell you, like, has it actually been submitted yet or not? And it brings in some information from the assignment level, like what assignment was the submission for? So they're mostly these two tables. I think there's actually several others that kind of provide contextual columns as well. Discussion boards. The discussion board data in Canvas is very interesting because of how they separate the first post in a thread with everything else in the thread. And so this one kind of brings it all together. It has some additional fields created to help you group the messages in different ways depending on what level of the conversation you're interested in. So there's a traditional parent-child relationship that you can use. You can group it all by the first reply within a thread, different things like that. But yes, there you go. So CVS, in our naming conventions, Canvas, and activity log. So if you're familiar with the caliper data, all Canvas, we built the activity log to hopefully make that a little bit more usable. It's a very big table. There's a lot of data in there. But some of the work we're doing, there's some cleanup. We have in some of our downstream use cases required like an activity duration. So that's built into here. There's a lot of assumptions that go into an activity duration calculation. So there's some details within the documentation that kind of tells you how we did that, why we did that. And thanks to Paul, our prior Canvas data expert, we were actually able to tie the activity to a specific course. if it was actually related to that course. Not all activities related to a course, but if it was, you'll be able to see which course it was for. That's the big win there. Crosswalks between PeopleSoft and Canvas. So this one's person class. Basically, if someone doesn't have a student enroll record in PeopleSoft, or an instructor doesn't have an instructor class record in PeopleSoft, they're not going to be in the crosswalk. So they have to have some sort of a relationship in both the Canvas and PeopleSoft sides to show up in this table. That's the crucial part. But it gives you an easy way to just join Canvas tables to PeopleSoft tables using basic IDs. That can get complicated otherwise. Different. Similarly, just class level crosswalk, and then we're going to have just a person level crosswalk. And you can see the names. They're both PS CVS crosswalk, but this one's at the person class level, this one's at the class level, this one's at the person level. And you might want to use these for different purposes, depending on your use case. But generally, I'd start with that person class if you have people and classes. All right, classes dimension. So if you've used PS class table, PS ASU A class, one record per class, this one is similar to what was done with A class in PeopleSoft. Took it several steps further. So we brought in additional catalog data, combined section information, dates and durations, and all kinds of stuff. This one also, I think, is the first one that I've gone over that has a summary table. So a summary table is where you'll find almost all the information that you get out of the base table, as long as it's not super sensitive. But it's also going to have more aggregation. So you can find in the class summary, for instance, like, I don't know exactly, there's probably a column for like average student Canvas session length or something for the class. So there's a lot of analytic aggregates that you'll find within the summary tables. Also additional denormalization. Essay dates. So if you're familiar with D-Day in the warehouse, it's very financially oriented. You get quarters and stuff. This is more student focused. So what was the current term on a given date? What was the next term as of that date? Lots of things like that. Essay terms better. User object query. Most people probably won't care about this. This is really just a record of like who's querying what tables in the warehouse. So we use this internally for metrics. External academic summary. This is just change capture for a PeopleSoft table because for some reason, like high school GPAs just get deleted. And that was kind of annoying. So we're creating a history there, and then we're going to figure out how to use that later. EXT school. If you have ever used the external org tables in PeopleSoft, you'll see a lot of the descriptions are like, updated, use this one instead. So the big thing is no matter what ID you have, even if it's an older ID, you're going to get the most updated description, address, whatever for another school. As a grade, kind of mentioned this, there's things like, is this a good grade or a bad grade? But also there's all kinds of flags, like, is the grade they received at least a B minus? Like, there's a flag for that. So lots of analytic oriented fields there. Instructor class. So this is kind of like the PS class instructor. You'll notice this is one of a couple, maybe a few tables where we just took the PeopleSoft name and flipped it. Made more sense to us that way. You're going to get basically the same information. There's some cleaning being done. We also bring in some information from the class meeting patterns. So if you're familiar with ASU A class, there's like days of the week that this class meets. We're kind of doing the same thing at the class structure level because a class with multiple instructors, those instructors aren't necessarily each working all of those days. So if you're doing anything at the instructor level, in here. MB events, so mobile app data, one of two, and then push notifications. unless your name is Liz, you probably don't care about these. But if you're at all interested in mobile app usage, these will make your life easier. So who's doing what in the mobile app, who's seeing what in the mobile app. There's some calculations done in there, again, like turning the activity into sessions, which can okay, so this one is going to be ASU person. I'm referring to this as the start of the end of dPerson view. It's going to be a long time process, but it's going to be very similar to what you'd find there. There are some problems with dPerson view, especially in the governance space. There's some data in there that probably shouldn't be available to some people who can see it. So this one's in a different schema. There's also a directory version of this, which is in the global schema. That is more appropriate for people a lot of people using dPerson view who don't actually have access to student data, employee data. This is actually just directory level data like you'd find in directory services. But hopefully this is better. I don't want to get into all the now. So yeah, person dimension, 1 row per person, whether if they've been a student, faculty, courtesy affiliate. Also find there, like, see who's a courtesy affiliate, who's ever been a courtesy affiliate. This is one place to find that. And that kind of means something different to different people. Plans dimension, used PS plan table, CS double underscore Desker academic plan. Essay plan might be for you. Race ethnicity dimension, this is really meant to be used with ASU person. There's one specific column in ASU person. This will give you things like URM flags, flag, national, all that good stuff. Service indicator impact, meant to be used with service indicators. Plan change requests, that one's super detailed. Grad, undergrad, completely different, multiple sources. This one will just make your life easier if you're at all interested in plan change requests. There's also a flag in there whether it was implemented or not. And there were some assumptions made along the way, but that's going to be your best source for all of that. If you're interested about students going to other schools before ASU, this might be a place to look. Did they get a degree? I think we have what is their GPA from those schools, all that kind of stuff. How many credits did they bring in? Student groups, service indicators. If you're using student groups or service indicators, these will just make your life easier, especially service indicators because the data gets a little sketchy there. Student level, so kind of like ASU person, 1 row per person, but this is only going to be people who have been students at some point. And it's going to be more academically oriented information about them. So within person, you might get something like home address because that applies to employees as well. Within student, you'll get things like diploma address, the CVIS address, housing address. It's not all addresses either, but there are a lot of address columns in these tables. Student year, so if you're into financial aid kind of stuff, this might be a good place for you. At some point we might have something else in there for student year, but that's mostly what it is. Financial aggregations, FERPA status, things like that. If you've been in the FAP views, for instance, you'll find a lot of that information in here. Student class, so better than PS student enroll because you don't have to worry about students registering for the same class in 2 different careers. That is the main reason to use this one instead. That's not the only reason. There's lots of reasons to use this table. Lots of good stuff in there, especially if you're doing analytic work. Students' intent to register. So news to me this year, we actually ask students if they're planning to come back, and they sometimes answer. So that's done through Salesforce cases and the Sunnybot. This currently only has Salesforce cases because the Sunny data is atrocious. Maybe someday. Student term, so things like, oh, we're going to use student profile, but here's just the primary record values because we want to get to the student term level. There's some stuff in student profile that just has nothing to do with plans or careers even. Well, those columns just kind of make more sense in here. We bring in stuff from housing. We bring in stuff from financial aid. Anything that makes sense, one row per student per term, you can find in here. In addition to the primary records, you can also just get like a list of all their plans for the term, things like that. Student term career, kind of similar. We're adding in career. So something like current GPA, cumulative GPA, those are in student profile, but again, they have nothing to do with the plan. And a lot of people think that's the plan GPA. So one of the things we're trying to do is make it more explicit what the level of detail is for these different metrics. Lots of analytic value on that one too. Application submissions, so kind of like the admissions fact tables. We've got 2 objects and 1 more coming. So this one has details that are appropriate for both grad and undergrad. It says all, but like we don't really have law data, do we? Then we also have one specifically for undergraduate-oriented data, and there's a grad one hopefully coming out soon as well. I'm just going to keep saying soon. It's been soon for several months now. Yeah, so Kayla started it, and she's been gone for how long? Then it was on my plate, which was the problem, and now Kendall's working on it, so it'll probably actually get done. Term dimension, this is the best table in the warehouse. If you want to know what the current term is, what the next term is, anything you're doing with report automation, there's probably something in here for you. Term session, similar, but sessions, it's not entirely similar because we don't define a current session because you get things like A's and C's overlapping, and then there's some weird stuff happening in summer, so we don't go that far. But if you've ever looked at the academic calendar online, and you're like, God, where's that date in the warehouse? It's in one of like a dozen tables, or you can just go here. So this has pretty much all the dates. There is no grade due date. We're still kind of trying to figure out the best approach for that one. And that's it for objects. So I was a little worried. I have like 15 slides. I'm like, there's no way we're going to take up the whole time. But that took way longer than summary sheets. Pull up one of these. So this is a starting point. This one would be like if you went to links.edu/essay student class, you'd get here. It's going to give you links to our detailed SQL documentation, our data elements, which is kind of like data dictionary and stuff, details about the objects, where they are, what they are, grain, population filters, going to describe the different versions that we have, links to other things, sample queries for each of the objects. So if you're not quite sure how to use them or something, and then a change history for the object. So what have we changed? When did we change? Data elements. So these docs are kind of what we put into the data dictionary, soon to be open metadata. We have these blue objects, which is what actually goes in the dictionary. And then we have the red ones, maroon, sorry, which are more developer oriented. So there might be additional information in here potentially that we can't put into the data dictionary for whatever reason. But for the most part, I'd start with the blue ones. This is where you're going to get definitions, usage notes, sample values. There's some governance stuff in here. I wouldn't trust much. Some data lineage stuff. If you want to know what the actual column name is, you have to go way over here. So we had some objects that only had like slowly changing and simulated snapshots, and you had to kind of go in there and filter down to just get the current stuff. So we now have current tables, base tables for everything. We have true nulls in most of the tables at this point, rather than null equivalents. So if you ever saw like a negative 32,768 and wondered why are there so many of these, that was a null equivalent for a small integer. Because if you've ever tried to use the GPA column in student profile in the warehouse, and you're like, why are there so many 0 GPAs? It was really a null. So I thought maybe negative 32,768 might stand out a little bit more. But you don't have those anymore. Term session dimension I mentioned, academic stack. We now have the submitted application tables I covered, student term career, person object, the directory variation of that, our instructor class object, plan change object, mobile app, the student external records, including our external org dimension. So all this stuff is essentially new since the last presentation. And I'm not sure if I want to go into details of this, but there is, if you look at SA student test or SA test in the ASU student schema, you're going to find some tables. These are not currently documented. They were kind of done on the side. But if you want test scores, or especially if you're doing something with math placement or English placement, this might make your life easier. So feel free to contact me if you're interested in any of that stuff, and I'll kind of do a little walkthrough. Eventually this will all be documented, but there's a couple more tables that I want to put out first. All right, so what's coming first? All this hopefully in the next year. So the graduate application data, the admissions master list, if you're familiar with the master list, we're hoping to put the master list in the warehouse. Student term summary, student summary. So again, these are these high-level aggregations, extensions on student term and student. These will be in the ASU student schema, so they're more accessible as well. Lots of aggregations in there, lots of denormalization. I do think between SA student summary, student term summary, SA student class summary, and class summary, you can probably do like 80% of most of ASU's reporting until you use the word census, and then we have problems. Tutoring activity table, this one's been a load of fun. Liz's current project, trying to figure out what I was thinking with that one. Re-enrollment intention. Is this one done or not? I have it as both done and not done. Okay. Yeah, so maybe we'll get the sunny data into that object as well. Well, yeah, we'll pretend that's why I put it on here. We're doing kind of a record of student and advising appointments, student Canvas course rather than PeopleSoft class. The main reason we're building this is because we can get the PeopleSoft course grade now with Canvas Data 2, and we want to persist a history of that. Class meeting patterns, lots of stuff happening for the learning enterprise data. It's been long ongoing. Student finances, student financial aid, change logs on those. And eventually I'll get back to the clearinghouse data, I'm sure. Documentation, so open metadata, hopefully this will be out in January. We'll have all our information in there, so it'll be more searchable and all that good stuff. Within open metadata, we have data lineage, which kind of works. We're working on entity relationship diagrams, and I did want to pull these up. So I spent all last Thursday building this, and therefore you have to see it, because I built it just for this presentation. So I didn't get access to that, right? They never replied. So I built this instead. What? Well, that's not cool. Cloudflare. Let me see if I can get to this directory. Okay, so I can get there. I can get there. Huh. Well, that's not cool at all. Okay, this is still loaded, so let's see if it breaks. So the idea is we're going to hopefully create a complete entity relationship diagram. And I haven't done JavaScript in at least a decade, so this has been quite a blast. AI did most of the work. But the idea is you'll be able to see all the objects we have, which objects are generally used with which other objects. Hopefully I'll be able to get to the next step, which is like how they're used together. Not quite there yet. Just getting everything formatted and not overlapping and stuff has been quite a hassle. But you can click on an object, it'll list the fields. Hover over an object name, you get kind of the data dictionary stuff for it. Hover over a column name, you get the data dictionary stuff for it. Obviously still need a lot of work on formatting and whatnot, but I cannot overestimate, or I can't underrepresent how much work this was. This was a headache. So hopefully everyone wants ERDs, because I would not like to throw this away. So hopefully we'll have that out fairly soon. Obviously I need to figure out hosting. Large language models, so there's a bunch out there. You can get to them from the student data enrichment page. You can get to them from the SQL support page. I'm going to focus on 3 right now. So you can use one to interpret a query. You can use one to improve a query. And you can use one to create a query with various levels of success. But these models have essentially complete data dictionary information for all the student data enrichment objects in the warehouse. And if you don't like writing SQL or you've inherited someone else's SQL, it might be a good place to take a look. The downside is if you're doing interpreting or improving, again, it's just the enriched objects. It doesn't know anything about anything other than enriched objects at this point. If you want to learn more about those, end of the day tomorrow, just like the last 2 years, it'll probably be a complete disaster. Training content. Oh, I thought there was one more after that. So again, within the Data Academy, hopefully going to be spinning up more in here and getting this kind of integrated within some of the courses. So I mentioned there's another SQL course coming. We're going to use basically the enriched object with not real data as training materials for those courses. So a good way to kind of get familiar with the structures and how to use them while you learn SQL. Collaboration opportunities, so we have a users group. Let me know if you'd like to join. It's monthly. Kind of go over recent work, upcoming work. If you want to have a voice in kind of how we create things, what we create, how we name things, what logic gets used, this is the place to do it. Or our Slack channel, Student Data Enrichment. If you have any questions, you can always ask in that channel as well. We're always looking for feedback. There's the form for that. And if you don't like something and you don't say something, then it's your own fault that it still sucks. So there's a feedback form. And if you put in a request especially, we can always use additional development work because we are a very small team. So if you want to help out, if you want to submit a request, you can submit a request and not help out if you really want to. Even if you have something that you've already built in user databases and you want us to convert it, like that's also an option here. So yeah, got a presentation with Jennifer and Phil tomorrow on student academic records. Going to talk about a lot of these objects as part of the student life cycle, and then the AI presentation at the end of the day tomorrow. Any quick questions? Everyone just wants to go eat. Yeah. All right, thanks.